The sigh of relief that you heard Eastern Daylight Time at 2:30 this afternoon was the good news. The Reserve Bank has decided not to raise interest rates, or, as the media would have it,
the Reserve Bank has gifted Australians some Christmas relief, keeping the official cash rate on hold.
A Christmas reprieve for borrowers, with the Reserve Bank leaving the official interest rate on hold today.
Borrowers are ending the year with some good news of sorts. The Reserve Bank has decided to leave official interest rates on hold.
Yes, interest rates have not gone up for a whole 30 days since the last time that they went up. And now that the federal government has rigged the way that the Reserve Bank will have its meetings into the future, a whole new group of people will make the decision in February, and then they won't meet every week. They'll be meeting every month. They'll be meeting every 6 weeks, meaning only 8 times rather than 11 times, which has been the long-standing practice. But of course, they want to avoid interest rate rises. So if there's different people making the decisions and they're meeting fewer times, then perhaps interest rates won't go up. Of course, Grim Jim, the great passenger of the Australian economy, remember, goes missing when the news is bad, holds a press conference when the news is good. Well, he was there to tell you that everything is awesome. He is living in Legoland this December.
This is welcome news for people who are already stretched enough. The last thing that people needed at Christmas time was another rate rise, and so I think this decision today from the Reserve Bank will be met with sighs of relief right around Australia.
Now, forgive me firstly for saying the same thing that Grim Jim did about the sigh of relief, but secondly, forgive me for maybe not having the balloons fall from the sky and confetti cannons going off on the set. You see, the current situation when it comes to interest rates, yes, didn't get any worse. But dare I say, like a python that's strangling you, or in this case, Homer Simpson, it's still strangling you. Sure, it's not as tight as it could be if it decided to get tighter, but it's still too tight. Because you see, remember, these are the highest interest rates that we have had in 12 years. Now, while it feels like a moment ago, when I say something like 12 years ago, let me put it into some perspective. In 2011, Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister. Well, that feels like 2 seconds ago. But what if I told you we've had 5 different Prime Ministers since interest rates were this high back in 2011? What if I told you the #1 movie in 2011 was the second of the final of the Harry Potters, with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. That's the last time interest rates were this high. And the last time interest rates were this high, packed to the rafters, was still winning Logies on Channel 7. So the point is, while, yes, it didn't get worse today, it didn't get any better. So while the politicians and the media want to say, a gift for homeowners this evening, as things didn't get any worse, that's a pretty low bar for what we expect in terms of help when it comes to the economy. Now, I've shown you these numbers repetitively because I want it to be seen by those that are making the decisions in Canberra that the average Australian, and the reason I keep talking about the python and the reason we're the Homer Simpson in this analogy, and not just because it's one big bloke on the telly talking about another big bloke on the telly, the reality is that for people who have $500,000 that they're trying to pay off, since this government came to power, since these interest rates, the python is taking $13,500 extra than it did before this government came to power. $750,000 loan, that's basically the average for Australians. They've had to find an extra $21,000. And if you're paying off more than $1 million, it's at least 30 grand that you've had to find since the interest rates started to go up. So forgive me. Forgive me if I don't fall for the government talking point that we got a gift today. We're still being strangled. But for want of a better term, our captors have decided not to increase the pain. So therefore, please be thankful. That's a slightly bizarre relationship to be having with your government. And forgive me if I don't believe that this government, which apparently is talking about cost of living all day, every day, and we talk about it at the cabinet table like you talk about it at the kitchen table, because we're like you. Okay. Apart from the highest pay rise that in 10 years, that's what they got. Apart from, of course, the guaranteed employment in the Senate. If you're one of those backbench losers that'll have no place to play, or someone like Lydia Thorpe who's going to sit around for 6 years getting $1.2 million. Oh, yes, they very much care about cost of living. So forgive me if I don't think that a Labor senator trying to change the subject like we showed you last night, Murray Watt, not passing a law about Christmas hams, but instead he says, my position is we should ask the supermarkets to freeze the cost of Christmas hams because Christmas hams is very important. Please, forgive me if I don't actually think that that's action on what we all know to be the issue, which of course is inflation. But again, Grim Jim, desperate to make it seem that because the squeeze is not as tight as it could be, but it's still as tight as it was last week, apparently again in Legoland, everything is awesome.
We are making welcome and encouraging progress in the fight against inflation.
Now, again, this is all spin that the Canberra, you know, all the yes voters who live in the ACT and talk about politics for a little, all the people desperate to find a way to, break the downward spiral of the government. Oh, they're turning the corner. They're turning the corner. Now, the Treasurer says that to you today, when, as we showed you last night, consumer surveys are telling us that an extreme majority of Australians now are under some form of cost of living pressure, with the best part of almost 80% of people saying that they are in financial stress right now. But if you don't believe that graph, if you don't believe what I've been saying, let's turn our attention to a sector that this government should be supporting with the $20 billion surplus that it has. Now, OK, obviously they're not going to cut fuel prices. They should. But at this particular time when more people are lining up around the block, literally around the block, for things like food to come out of charities, so as the Turbans for Australia charity told us, it means that's $80 they don't have to spend on food, which means they can spend the $80 they'd otherwise spend on food, on things like medicine or trying to pay the power bills. People are seriously doing it tough. And you would think that a federal government with a $20 billion surplus would be able to carve off $1 billion for relief for charities this Christmas. But no, none of that. Instead, we learned today, and well done to the reporting, I believe this is in the Courier Mail, where Queensland charities I want to focus in on here in a second. Salvation Army Queensland is reporting about 25% down in terms of the number of donations that they are getting, and that's just 3 weeks before Christmas, despite the fact that there is a huge amount of demand for what they do. And then there's this heartbreaking situation. Rural charity Drought Angels said the number of people that are needing help has doubled, with more inquiries coming through. But how's this? It comes after a truck with $250,000 of donations for the charity Drought Angels had been stolen. It was stolen on Sunday afternoon from their Logan depot. The boss, Jason Law, that's the bloke you can see on your screen now, despite the fact that they have lost, somebody stole, some lowlife, some grub, some piece of work, stole $250,000 worth of donations for a charity that helps regional people. He still says we're committed to giving farmers money, especially over the Christmas time. So what this means is that anything we're going to sell and generate income has put a massive dent financially in this. It's the toughest time for communities around Australia, let alone those living on the land who also feel isolated at this time. It's really hard to get the family together if they don't feel isolated. $250,000 worth of stuff that charity, Drought Angels, would have been able to get to people in regional communities to make Christmas a little bit better. A little bit better. Now, as you know, the focus on this show this week is trying to raise money for Humpty Dumpty, in particular our trip to Port Lincoln. So I'll get into chapter and verse on that in a second. But if you can help us with that, but also you might be able to help us with Drought Angels, let's try and send some big money their way. Now, maybe next week we'll focus on them hardcore between now and Christmas, but they've lost $250,000 worth of donations. So you can help them with dollars or effort or something else. Go to their website, donate.droughtangels, all one word, .org.au. Donate.droughtangels.org.au, or just go droughtangels.org.au, and that'll take you to where you can help them out. Meantime, the federal government says, oh, we're doing everything we possibly can. Really? Are you? You could start by giving Drought Angels $250,000 to replace what some person stole from them.